One day I came upon a couple of fantastic videos about bespoke shoemaking. I put the links below. I had an ancestor who was a shoemaker, and I always wanted to own bespoke shoes. It was pure joy to watch these videos, and of course I thought, I can do this. Everything looked so easy. Of course, I'm aware that all true masters in any skill make things look easy. So I started to take impressions of my feet with alginate, made a mold, added alginate, and stepped into it. So far, so good, except for the huge mess it made. My flatmates were really not amused. The next step was to fill plaster into the cavity. The mess was even worse, but I finally ended up having my feet as plaster models. Pity you can't use them as shoe lasts, because you cannot use nails on them. So I had to make a plaster shell of those feet. Then I would fill the newly gained hollow space with epoxy resin. I used to learn earlier that you isolate the plaster with Vaseline so that the resin would not stick to the plaster. But of course, in my case, the resin and the plaster would not separate. After hours of hammering, I released one resin foot from its plastery shell. The other one broke. That was my first point of frustration. Everything went to the trash, except for the one resin foot. So what to do next? Buy a last and customize it. As if. The resin last finally arrived, and I detected that there was a stable sole of metal attached to the bottom. The last was originally created for industrial use. WTF. With a metal sole, you cannot really use nails. So it took quite some time to remove the metal parts, and then I milled down the parts which seemed too large as compared to my epoxy foot, and added epoxy clay to the parts where I needed to expand the size. The plastic shavings from this action were everywhere and would stick to my shirt, pants, shoes, and I would carry them through all the rooms. Flatmates asked to stop the shoemaking process, please. They did not succeed. I still carried on. While I sanded the last with a drill, the drill was caught in the raincoat that I put on to avoid the shavings from sticking to my clothes. It did not look like a milling instrument afterwards, and my right thumb was smashed. No blood, though, but a small, totally numb finger and rotten fingernail. I thought the thumb was broken. Was this a sign to stop? For a couple of days I thought so. I couldn't have continued anyways because I wasn't able to use my thumb. That was my second point of frustration. The good news is, it was not broken. After some time of reconciliation, though, I carried on. Next, I watched tons of videos on how to make a shoe pattern and how to make the lining. Finally, I started to cut the leather from this pattern. The next step would be the thinning of the leather at the edges, so-called skiving. Wow, how hard can that be? I realized that my skiving knives must be totally blunt and was frustrated again. I watched videos on how to sharpen skiving knives. I sharpened them and they were even more blunt. I bought a device to keep the sharpening angle constantly the same. Did not work either. I built myself a leather strobe and applied polishing paste, which finally did it. Next, I had to sew the upper to the lining. I do have an old sewing machine with an industrial hook, but the needle was too weak for the leather and the yarn too thin. I got myself the adequate ones. Still, sewing didn't work. The machine would not transport the leather. The stitches were so small and close to each other that I produced a rip. Great, that. What to do next? I looked into eBay for old cobbler sewing machines, but to be honest, I did not want to pay that much. So, should I rather buy a Chinese leather sewing machine? These are kind of cheap, but you have to turn the wheel by hand. And when I sew, I might need both hands to guide the leather and not one hand on the wheel. And anyways, I would have this monster standing in my room later on. No, thanks. I was devastated. I did some more research and found out that there are special sewing machine feet with Teflon or with little rolls to enhance transportation of the leather. That was the cheapest option, and I took it. Now I had to place the leather on the last and do the lasting, meaning pull the leather over the insole. What a shock! The leather did not fit at all. I had no idea what went wrong. The opening for the foot through which you slip into the shoe was by far too large. I started all over. New last, new customization, new leather. This time I used a leather-like cleaning rag as upper and some plastic as a sole. The result was that it was, again, too wide and I did not like the shape. So I customized the last into a round tip shape, made everything smaller, and used the old leather of a chair. Now I started lasting the leather. Then I found out that the nails I had ordered as cobbler nails were blunt. I couldn't hammer them into the last. So I got myself another brand, really sharp pointed. Yes, I got the leather attached to the insole and started the welting. When I started to sew the outer sole to the strap, I slipped and rammed the awl into the ball of my left hand. This time there was blood. It hurt only after 2 or 3 days. I finished making the heel, although my skills to smoothen the different layers of leather were not really convincing. The result was some kind of shoe which could be used. Then, after fighting with the last to come off, another obstacle which could be taken, there was this moment full of suspense. Would my bespoke shoe fit? No. When I tried to walk, I would slip out of the heel part, and it was again and again too wide. This time, the waist. Not that I really expected a perfect fitting shoe, but this? So, what am I gonna do now? Thinking. Maybe this autodidact business is not as good as I thought. Maybe I should get some advice. Did I learn something from all this? Yes, I definitely overestimated myself. And I asked myself if doggedness is really helpful. So do the Edison or stop? Edison is said to have built 1,000 light bulbs before the first one was a success. What would you do?